Okay, so let's talk about India. You've got the world's most populous country making this enormous bet on its energy future. And what are they betting on? Something you might not expect: biofuels. We're going to break down this incredibly ambitious plan, the science behind it, and why it's such a high-stakes gamble.
So you really have to ask, right? Why is this global economic powerhouse pinning its energy security on, of all things, sugarcane? It seems kind of simple, but the answer is anything but.
And when I say ambitious, I mean really ambitious. The Indian government wants to blend 20% bioethanol into every single liter of gasoline sold in the country. And they want to do it by 2025. Now, to give you some perspective, they're sitting at around 12% right now. So getting to 20% in such a short time, that is a monumental leap.
And wherever there's that much ambition, a lot of money is sure to follow. We're talking about a market that's projected to be worth a staggering $5.2 billion by 2027. So make no mistake, this isn't just an environmental policy. This is a major, major economic play.
Okay, so how did this whole thing actually work? How do you take plants and, in some cases, literal garbage and turn it into clean fuel for your car? Let's dive into the blueprint.
So at its heart, bioethanol is pretty straightforward. It's a renewable fuel, basically an alcohol, made from plant-based stuff. It's designed to be a cleaner-burning alternative to gasoline. But here's the crucial part. Which plants you use to make it, well, that's where the story gets really, really interesting. And that brings us to the two different generations of bioethanol. First gen, or 1G, is the old-school method. You use food crops like sugarcane and corn. It works, but it creates this massive problem. Are you using your farmland to grow food for people or fuel for cars? That's where second generation, or 2G, comes in. This is the real game changer. It uses agricultural waste. We're talking rice straw, wood chips, stuff that would normally get thrown away. It literally turns trash into treasure, and it sidesteps that whole food versus fuel dilemma.
So in India's case, what are the main ingredients, the feedstocks they're throwing into the mix? Well, the number one source, by a long shot, is sugarcane molasses. That's a byproduct from making sugar. But they're also using grains like corn and broken rice, and they're looking more and more at those agricultural residues to really power that 2G revolution we just talked about.
The actual production process is basically a three-step dance. First, you have pre-treatment, where you break down all that raw plant material into simple sugars. Then comes fermentation. You add yeast, and it just munches on those sugars, producing ethanol. And finally, you have distillation. That's where you separate and purify the ethanol until it's 99.5% pure, ready to go right into a fuel tank.
So the blueprint sounds pretty solid, right? Well, yeah. But actually putting it into practice, that's where things are hitting a major wall. It's time for a sobering reality check, where these huge plans come face to face with the realities on the farm.
And this reality check isn't just speculation. It comes from a brand new 2024 report by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They've been crunching the numbers on India's biofuel plan, and let's just say the forecast is complicated.
And the USDA report does not mince words. It says, flat out, that India is expected to have a feedstock shortage. And because of that, the blending rate isn't going up to 20%, it's actually expected to drop to just 11.5%. That's not just missing the target, it's a huge step backward. This chart just lays it all out there in plain sight. To hit that 2025 goal, India needs more than 10 billion liters of ethanol. But what's the forecast for what they'll actually produce? Just 6.35 billion liters. That is a massive, massive gap between the ambition and the reality on the ground.
So what's going on here? Why the huge shortfall? Well, it's not just one thing. It's a perfect storm. Crop yields for both sugarcane and rice are down because of bad weather and pests. And in response, the government itself is hitting the brakes, restricting the use of sugar for fuel because they need to protect the country's food supply.
And that brings us right back to the absolute core of this entire story, the food versus fuel dilemma. It's the classic balancing act. To keep food prices from spiraling out of control and to make sure there's enough to eat, the government is having to deliberately slow down the biofuel program. You can't burn your crops for fuel if people need them for food. This isn't just some abstract economic problem. It's all happening in very real places. The country's sugarcane production is heavily concentrated in just a handful of states. Look at this. Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra are the absolute powerhouses. So when their harvests take a hit, the entire national biofuel plan feels the pain.
So, with all these massive challenges, is the plan just doomed? Is it dead in the water? Well, not necessarily.
Let's look at the path forward, because technology and innovation might just be able to close that gap.
Okay, this is where things get really cool. There are some amazing next-gen solutions being worked on. Scientists are developing stuff like consolidated bioprocessing, which basically squishes multiple production steps into one to make it cheaper. They're creating engineered yeast strains, think of them like super yeast, that can pump out way more ethanol. Then you've got really futuristic ideas, like making ethanol from algae grown in water, which completely avoids using farmland, or even using AI to make the whole supply chain smarter.
But let's be real. How close are we to actually using this stuff? This timeline uses a scale called Technology Readiness Levels, or TRLs. It's basically a fancy way of saying, is this ready to go, or is it still just an idea in a lab? As you can see, first gen from sugarcane is mature. It's ready. Second gen from agricultural waste is in the validation stage. It's getting there. But that really cool third gen stuff, like from algae, that's still way down in the early research phase.
Which brings us all the way back to the ultimate, multi-billion-dollar question. It's the gamble India is taking right now. Can this country power its booming, fast-growing economy on renewable fuel without putting its own food security at risk? The answer to that question is going to define India's energy future for decades to come.